Thank you. All right. So you've heard a lot from Slack today, from people that work on product, marketing, and now we actually want to hear from real-life customers. And we also are gonna, we're gonna have a conversation here, and then invite you all to ask questions at the end. So we've got a great lineup here just to do the kind of quick introductions. We've got Zofia Ciechowska from Spotify, who runs strategy operations there. Ilya Rivkin, Associate Director of Technology at RGA. And Michael Villasenor, Creative Director of Marketing Innovation for the New York Times. So let's do another round of applause for these guys. Yeah. Cool. So the topic for the panel is about culture, but we're actually going to expand it to be a little bit broader. We are going to start with culture and just talk a little bit about that. As we've kind of surveyed customers, we've heard from customers that Slack helps to improve their culture, but we're also not naive enough to say that Slack is the only thing that drives culture. Culture is a very amorphous thing that's unique to every single company. So I wanted to start it off with a question for you all. Like, what about your cultures do you think is unique about the way you've adopted Slack? Would love to hear a little bit about your cultures individually, and then how it relates to your use of Slack.
Can you start? Oh, sure.
All right.
So the New York Times, large organization. Often, in the past, you would have significant siloing that occurs based on department, based on product they're putting out there, based on conversation we may be sharing. Slack has, in a lot of ways, and we can touch maybe on the culture separately, but Slack has allowed us to, in a lot of ways, create, I guess it's really through channels or conversations that can extend from a developer to designer to maybe the product manager that wouldn't have necessarily extended unless we were in a meeting together. It also, in a lot of ways, I think what actually is the most interesting thing is a lot of people who are non-participants to be participants. If we're rolling out a product that ultimately has impact on you, but we're not necessarily keeping you in mind when rolling it out or putting it together, having a public channel to say, here, this is what we're working on, all the cards are on the table, feel free to participate or just watch. It's just allowed for us, I think, in a larger sense, have just greater exposure, and I know we've talked about that, or you had mentioned that. And so in that, it's transformed our culture to speak more effectively across all these different departments.
And I know, Zofia, you were mentioning that transparency is a really important part of the Spotify culture, but there's also a value of autonomy. So how do those play within Slack?
Sure. So our company values, just to give you a little recap of what they actually are collaboration, innovation, sincerity, passion, and playfulness. And so things that play into collaboration and sincerity in particular are the value of transparency, which is something that our lead team, our CEO, talk about. They talk about its importance. And the reason behind that is if we work in public, if we share early, we reduce fear of failure, first of all. Learning from failure is hugely important at Spotify, and celebrating failure, actually, we celebrate failure, so transparency is very crucial for that. So if we're sharing things in Slack channels, especially public ones, within our small teams or company-wide, that helps with collaboration and innovation and all of those different values that I mentioned.
Was it hard to? It sounds like an ingrained part of the culture was being more transparent. So when you went to Slack, was it hard to get people to do it in channels and do it in the open public setting?
So my team is the strategy operations team, and that means my team is tasked with helping Spotifyers do meaningful work. So that means we help our lead team set strategy, and then we communicate that strategy to our teams, and we help them set goals to reach those high-level strategies. So really, when it comes to transparency and sorry, what was that? So we're talking about autonomy, essentially. Was it difficult to get people to embrace transparency? Yeah. That was your question. I think No, generally no.
Yeah.
That is a habit for us. We are very open and sincere in the way that we work. But we do have this wonderful thing at Spotify called team autonomy, which is something we hold very dear to our heart. And that means that teams, if they choose to use a tool that they think will increase their productivity, they will use it. That's how Slack came about at Spotify. Obviously, teams, because they're autonomous, can also say, we choose not to use Slack because we prefer something else. So right now, as our organization grows, we're over 2,000 people right now, distributed across 31 offices. Autonomy rears its head sometimes, and we say, well, we need to get everyone talking in one place. So we're in this transition of getting everyone on board on Slack, and it's going great so far. So you can do it with autonomous teams.
I think it's similar to a lot of the ways that companies adopt Slack, and I think specifically our RGA was sort of a bottoms-up method as well. So do you want to talk about that?
Sure, yeah. So first I want to talk about RGA a little bit. If you're not familiar, we are a global digital advertising agency. So we got about 15 offices, about 1,800 people across all the offices, so worldwide, and we work with a lot of different companies. So sometimes we're on their stack, sometimes we're on our own stack, technically. So in terms of things like transparency, you wouldn't really get that, right? Because you would get different companies that aren't going to be competitors, but are going to be totally separate. So you're going to be kind of siloed, and in these silos, the tech leads have the ability to choose what works for them. So I know we had a few questions earlier of how much productivity is, how much is being increased. And I know on the RGA side, basically, we chose to use Slack. It wasn't top down. So top down is something like Outlook, where someone says, hey, everyone's using Outlook, and then you're kind of stuck with it. For us, we know that increases productivity because I used it in my team, someone else used it in their team, and then eventually, that kind of bubbled up to now the whole company is using it. So I think that kind of speaks for itself.
Yeah. And this segues right into the sort of productivity side that I wanted to kind of go into, and maybe maybe even go a little bit deeper and push you. How did you know that it was driving productivity for you and in your teams?
Sure, yeah. So I think the teams in particular, being a tech lead, part of my day is to not be a bottleneck. Because normally what would happen is someone would ask me a question, and it would be a one-to-one. It'd say, hey, Ilya, what's going on with this part in the iPhone app? And then I might know the answer, I might not know the answer. And then I would have to go to the next person. So you could really see that with Slack, I would just set up a channel. That would be, let's say, whatever tech channel. And then sometimes even if someone were to ask me the question directly, I would say, no, ask this in the tech channel, and then everyone kind of gets that information. Because essentially, you get that mythical man-month problem, I think, which is, it's all about N+1 communication. So if you can just talk in a channel, hopefully everyone's going to be able to get the answers, and I'm not a bottleneck anymore.
We do a similar thing where, someone DMs you a question, we really try to, put this in channel, multiple people can kind of see the answer, see the value from it, so that's great. So I'd love to hear additional kind of thoughts on productivity. I know that was a topic of the audience brought up.
I think to start, it really takes commitment, right? Where you see someone use it and you're like, oh, that's cool. I'm going to try that new app out. I'll give it a shot. A couple of us, especially on the innovation team, sat together and said, okay, well, what we're going to do is we're going to not answer emails right away. We're going to turn off Google Hangouts. And I actually went so far, and I think they think I'm nuts for this, is I unplugged my phone at my desk and put it in my drawer. Wow. And I was like, you can reach us on Slack, but we're going to post everything. We're going to tell you about every project that we're working on. Our status is public. And we want to hear from you. And what was interesting was, one, it was actually kind of scary, I think, from a productivity standpoint. This is good for the organization. This is good that I'm sharing. But what if someone takes a piece of information and misinterprets that or runs with it, and it's actually not the full picture? So we had to answer that. I think we're still trying to figure out how we do that best, if it's a private versus public channel. But as far as productivity, a good example actually was, there was one day I was trying to figure out, we have this bot in the newsroom that predicts the ability, whether a football team should go for the fourth down or not. And it just does some quantitative analysis and says yes or no. And sometimes it just tweets out random things. But we wanted to be able to figure out how we can package that alongside a bunch of other stuff that were these smart, let's call them bots.
Yeah.
I didn't know where to go. I don't really know who to talk to. It's a big organization. And the last thing I want to do is walk into the newsroom pit and ask or just yell out, hey, that would not go over well. But I went into random, did an @ here, which some of the developers didn't really like because everyone got a notification. I got a little wrist slap for that. But I did ask, who made this bot? And within 5 minutes, we had an answer.
Yeah.
And the person said, oh my God, like someone found the bot I worked on. Let's talk. We then had a coffee. So in a way, the productivity was the running around. I didn't send out an email that could have went to the wrong people, a Google Hangout message that would have bothered someone or I would have had to wait for. That worked. And then also, I think, which we're not talking about that much, is Slack is an extension point. It's a platform for communication that allows us to then, in that case, have a coffee.
Yeah.
Or it allowed me to meet somebody I would have never run into on a daily basis. So in kind of a small capsulized story, I think that's a good example of how productivity has been increased.
Yeah, and I mean, this kind of goes to, you talked about or before when we were kind of prepping for this, just the speed of innovation that Slack helps because everything's in public. You can kind of make connections faster. So I'd be curious on the Spotify side how that plays out.
So Daniel Ek, our CEO, says speed of iteration trumps quality of iteration. So we believe in moving fast. I think Slack definitely is one of the ways that helps us move faster. For my team in particular, things that we do to increase our productivity is searching for keywords that we're particularly interested in. So things like company bets, Spotify rhythm, our company values, our North Star goals, 2-year goals. This is all Spotify jargon to you, so I'll stop there. But we do that. We share a lot of things that are works in progress. That is a very common thing at Spotify, saying, take a look at my work. It's a work in progress, but I value your feedback because if you get your feedback sooner, you'll iterate faster on it, right? So I think Slack is definitely helpful in that because we can post a Google Doc or a Trello board and say you can hold us accountable.
Yeah.
You know, transparency, accountability, productivity.
For sure, and it's, I think the idea of emailing out this final perfect product, I think work is evolving past that, where you just sort of need to get stuff out there, get it iterated faster, and we found the same thing. On the flip side, though, I do want to go to some of the things that Noah brought up, where we're not naive, right? That there's some overwhelming, maybe noisy aspects of Slack, and we're doing a lot of things from a product standpoint with our SLI team here. That is such a cool name. Our SLI team here to make that easier from a product standpoint.
I want those right now.
Right now.
I want it right now.
Well, you can. He's in New York,
Yeah,
so you can go bother him. But how do you manage it today, right? How do you make Slack not overwhelming and noisy? What are the tips and tricks that you can share with the group here?
So I run Slack demos for teams. People find out that I'm good at Slack, and they say, hey, can you come and do a demo for my team? I'm like, sure. And this is really, especially when you're dealing with people who have only played around with Slack or haven't really used Slack before, I think the noise overload can be overwhelming, and it can become a turnoff for people very quickly if they don't know how to manage it. So I focus on emphasizing how they can manage that noise. Spotify, our Slack team has 2,300 plus users, and we have 1,800 channels and 136 app integrations. I checked this today. So we have there can be a lot of noise, and I spend a huge amount of time sitting with teams and saying, you have to put some effort in to make it work, considering our scale. I'm also Slack is going to send us amazing new things, so
we are.
to help you manage with that. But what I say is notification preferences. That's where you go. Desktop and mobile, make them different. For instance, I have 0 mobile notifications on my phone, apart from email. That's just a personal choice, but I find my phone very distracting, so I minimize that. So I show them how to configure those. Teaching people about Slack etiquette. It's okay to leave a channel. It's okay to mute a channel. If you want to be particularly considerate, tell people, hey, I'm leaving. Find me somewhere else. I'll be back soon, teaching people the appropriate usage of @here or @channel if there's like 300 people in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I've
I said
had that
@channel.
We've
too.
all been, we have a term for it.
We've all
at-
felt the Slack burn.
Yeah, we call it, we like to raccoon people. So it's a term we've came up with where if they're saying something in a wrong channel, we like raccoon it and then link to the channel
Yep,
it should
yep,
be in.
yep.
So there's all these little
Yeah.
nuanced cultural ways to deal with it. I don't know if either of you want to add on it, on how either you've individually or
Yeah.
organizationally.
Go for it.
Yeah, sure. I could add on to that. So yeah, Sophia, all the tips I think are great that you said. It's funny with our notifications. I actually have email off on my phone, but I have Slack on. For me, emails you could just answer those, whatever. But Slack usually someone's trying to say something important. At least when it's saying @Ilya.
Yeah.
So I have that. But also I like to star. So basically, the teams that I'm on, the people that are on my team, I like to star those so they get bubbled up.
Yep.
And also, it actually is a very tough problem. It's basically a signal to noise issue, and basically everyone's trying to deal with that now, like Facebook, Google, Instagram. It's you definitely want some noise. So I try to mute the very noisy channels, but we have channels like a tech channel. So this is just tech all across the company, and chances are your team isn't going to be that noisy, or if you have your channel set up properly, it's like you've got the tech part, you've got the design part. Hopefully people are talking about something that's relevant, and then most of the noise is going to come from these side interests that you might have.
Yeah.
But for example, just the other week there was a security issue found in some like back-end framework that lots of people use on the internet, and I found out about that. Saw that in the tech channel.
Yeah.
So some of that noise is definitely a good thing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it comes to really the right place, or the right conversation in the right place.
Yeah.
We can have a project channel that's public or private, and it's, VR. We worked on VR last year, and we had a channel where we said all the people who are participating in this project are in one channel. Great, we were already doing that. But it was almost like a tone that was picked up because it's carried over from the meeting of this is a serious channel where we're trying to accomplish things day in and day out. Meanwhile, there's another channel of us, still related to the same project, where there's Giphy, and we're joking around. We're saying, hey, have you seen this example? Have you seen this example? Mainly designers, but ultimately we created a sub-channel that was the right place to kind of have that conversation.
Yeah.
And that could be everything from, we were talking on the phone about a record collecting channel. We have a bunch of Adventure Time fans in our department. They have a lemon grab channel, and it's like a place where they can have fun. And I think it's completely appropriate to have fun on Slack. Actually, that's what brings the company culture alive.
Yeah.
But there's still those sort of the serious conversations, and I think it's a matter of maybe it's a maturity thing. Maybe it's us as an organization getting used to how we use this tool more effectively.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of ways with it. I think it ultimately is happening organically, and that's the best way to kind of see it evolve.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a balance between, putting some light rules in place with organic, over time. And it's actually a great segue to talk about more the personal side of it, where the connection side of it. I mean, you mentioned a little bit of it, but I mean, playfulness is actually one of our core values, and we use Slack to be a little bit playful, whether it's talking about things outside of work, and would love to hear your thoughts on or share how you use Slack to kind of connect as employees.
I think you talked about the importance of Slack basically enabling you to have coffees with people, especially when you work in a very large organization across multiple offices. I think, especially in those channels where you congregate around interests or hobbies that you share, it's a nice way to make friends. I recently bought a bike over Slack in our #cycling channel. I was like, anyone know of any good bikes? And this guy was like, hey, I make bikes.
Yep.
I was like, great, Rohan, hook me up. And a few days later, I had a bike in the bike room at Spotify all through Slack. So that was great. But we also have some very fun channels like #vultures, which is all people posting pictures of any free catering food that's left over, being like 7th floor
We have
Stockholm.
snacks, yeah.
Pizzas, falafels.
I love
vultures. #vultures is one of the most popular channels at Spotify, which is great. We also have slightly let's say, more highbrow topics like hashtag diversity, hashtag women at Spotify. Hugely important topics for us.
Yeah.
And we've actually made a lot of change in terms of like our diversity and inclusion momentum because of that, the existence of that channels, hashtag parents, and obviously music-related channels.
Good.
Techno, hip-hop, Spotify. We have a Spotify in Stockholm, which is great.
That's great.
And musicians. So yeah, people building bands over Slack.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. We have 10 minutes, so I want to move to Q&A for the audience, but I do want to just maybe have Michael and maybe Ilya just talk about the platform side of Slack. I know we haven't really gotten into that.
Yeah.
And maybe just 30 seconds on just like the power of it. It's something you think about, and we talked about it right before we got on.
Yeah. So I think Blossom's a good example of that. That's the part that actually intrigues me the most.
Yeah.
We've got people on the platform, great, and they're talking. What can we do to use Slack in order to make it another tracking tool, right? So people are obsessed with like tracking my steps in a day. I'm concerned about what my team's working on and at what rate and what are the roadblocks they're running into. And there's a lot of automated integration. So Trello is a good example of that. We have Google Calendar tied in, and then Google Analytics. So the work they're doing, once it's public facing, I want to get a real-time pulse check as to whether it's something that we should be investing more time in or not. And if we look at Blossom, that's another one, an automated bot that helps us be informed. I don't have time to do that sort of research, and I don't necessarily want to hire someone to do it for me. So if there's a bot that helps solve to make me more effective at the thing that I should be focused on, that's where I see the power of that platform and those extension points.
That's great. And Ilya was actually a developer for a little bit, so I'm curious on your tech mind on our platform.
Sure. Yeah. I actually haven't made any bots myself, but we do like to experiment in RGA. I'll be quick about this one. In order to be a tech company or even a digital agency, you need a ping pong table. So one of the things that we're doing, we're very interested in IoT, and we are very interested in bots. We're able to kind of fuse that together. So someone from our prototyping studio, they took one of those Amazon Dash buttons. You could do the IoT button. So if you're at the table and you're looking to play someone, you can hit the button. It'll go through like the Slack channel and have a challenge.
It's awesome.
So some of the fun stuff you can do.
Yeah. But let's do a round of applause for this amazing panel.